Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Embracing the Journey of Aging podcast with the Some Center for Gerontological Excellence at the University of Iowa. I am your host for today. My name is Jen Jones, and I am the program coordinator for our Optimal Aging Initiative at the Some Center. And I am joined today. I am super excited because not only do I get to see this person as a co-worker involved with the Some Center, but I'm also just in awe of Kitty Buckwalter. So here's what we have to say about you.
All right.
All right, Dr. Kathleen Buckwalter. Actually, I was like, I didn't know you had a name besides Kitty. You are not only a community member here locally, but a professor emeritus from the College of Nursing. You are a member of our Some Center leadership team, for which we are incredibly grateful. And as I said, better known to the universe as Kitty, right? Dr. Kathleen seemed so formal, and I thought, gosh, anybody that knows you knows how easy you are to talk to. So I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today. A lot of it will be about the work that you've done, the research that you have done, but also about how you got to that point. I kind of want to go back in the time machine, Kitty.
Okay. It's good for me to reminisce.
Okay,
too.
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, right, it's a good thing. So let's start with that. You, am I right, have been in the Iowa City area your whole life?
All my life.
I did not know you were
Born
Iowa
at
City.
university hospitals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've lived here ever since then. Couple of times away visiting professorships.
Okay.
At Duke University School of Nursing in 1991, and well, I did a stint in the Navy during the Vietnam War. I was in San Diego and then spent most of my time on Guam before coming back here to graduate school.
Wow.
But pretty much located here. We did a sabbatical in Oxford, England, and in Bern, Switzerland, for short periods of time. Hauled the family over there, which I just, cellos and video games and stuff you could never do on an airline now. But those were great experiences, but we were always happy to come back to Iowa City.
So were your mom and dad
Yes.
Iowans also
Yes.
then? Okay. Were your parents involved with the University of Iowa?
They were not.
Okay.
And part of the reason that I stayed on, although I did have some other opportunities, job opportunities, was I'm an only child.
Okay.
Only child nurse Catholic who's not going to care for their aging parents. And so
we won't unpack all of that today,
but they were both born in this area and died here.
Yeah. So what led you out of high school to the University of Iowa? And did you go straight to the College of Nursing? And what was the system when you were going through school? Was it still the School of Nursing, or was it College of Nursing by then?
It was a College of Nursing.
It was a College of Nursing,
yes.
Okay.
And I did not start at the University of Iowa in the College of Nursing.
Okay.
I started as a music major.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I still love music, but my freshman year, I enjoyed playing in the symphony, and I played in the chamber orchestra, took lessons, classes in theory and that sort of thing. But I did not like the solitary nature of being in a practice cubicle for hours every day, which is essential if you're going to be in performance. And I found that my personality was really, I wanted to be more with people. And so my sophomore year, I applied to the College of Nursing, but I was a year behind everybody else. And at that time, nurses were really considered second-class academics. In the sense that the basic science courses there was chemistry for nurses and physiology for nurses, which were dummied down, if you will, from the classes that, let's say, pre-med students were taking in the same basic sciences. But since I was not starting with my class, I ended up taking the same courses as the very hard-charging medical students. But I made it through the prerequisites and eventually got into nursing. And it seems like, I think, an odd
It seems like a
transition
complete 180. Yes,
music,
180 from
and
music. What was your
actually-
instrument? Was it cello?
No,
that
violin.
It was violin. Okay,
But,
yes.
but
right.
none of my courses my whole freshman year transferred.
Mattered.
Yeah. Maybe one elective or something like that, but really I had to start from
Wow.
scratch. But I always say nursing is the family business. On my father's side, I'm one of 7 graduates of the University of Iowa College of Nursing,
That's awesome.
starting with my great aunt Geneva in 1925.
Wow, when it was
And-
the School of Nursing.
Yes,
and
that's
everybody
right.
was in West Lawn.
And my Aunt
Yes.
Vivian was the first, when it was a college, it was a 5-year undergraduate program that she went
Oh
through
my
here.
gosh.
Cousins, children of my cousins.
Yeah.
So there's 7 of us, and I think we take a lot of pride in the University of Iowa College of Nursing. The men in the family work at the post office.
Oh, that's so funny. like we
It's
all
just
figured.
like-
But what was the string that pulled you? I mean, for music, no pun intended on the
Yeah.
string that pulled you. But what was it, that family history that you were like, oh, I see everybody, Aunt Genevieve was a nurse, so maybe that's where I'm supposed to
Well-
be. Or was it just random?
I think there were multiple factors. That was part of it,
Yeah.
family history, and I admired and respected
Sure.
what my relatives had done and were doing. I worked at Oak Knoll as a CNA
Okay.
in high school and also in college. I actually did special duty for an older gentleman who had had a stroke. And so when my classes were over, like at 3:30 in the afternoon from 4 to 7, I worked with him, and I really enjoyed that. So I had some nursing, not professional nursing, but I had exposure
Right.
to nursing environments, and I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
being a CNA, which
Yeah.
is and caring for people.
Right.
It's very
Right.
really gratifying. Still is
Yeah.
extremely rewarding.
And older adults.
And
Older adults,
older
because
adults.
that plays into such a huge part of your professional career, is this concept of caring for the older adult and the research that you have done. And, we talk about with the Some Center how our goal is to promote optimal aging and quality of life. And I will say, my personal story is that my mom has had 4 strokes and is in a nursing home,
Yeah.
and I don't know what we would do without our CNAs.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
care
they're the
that they give for,
backbone of
oh my
long-term
gosh,
care.
it just, and so not recognized for what they do on a daily basis, and we are so eternally grateful that they love and care for her. So,
Well, and there's another factor I have to say. Remember, I'm like 19, and my best friend from high school had gone away to a school in Minnesota, but decided to come back. Her dad was the county coroner, and so we thought, we'll go into nursing. She's also the one that said, let's get out of Iowa City. We'll join the Navy because the Vietnam War was raging.
Yes.
So we joined the
Oh my
Navy together. They
gosh.
paid for a small stipend and our books, and then we owed them 3 years of service. But
Okay.
a lot of it was not thoughtful career planning or anything. It's really been a career by fiat, if you will. But did have the family history, went in with my friend, and so a lot of different factors. And then I just really did not do well as an undergraduate. West Lawn was where the College of Nursing was at
Yes.
the time.
Yes.
And I failed foundations of nursing. I dropped the soap in the sink and sterile hand washing technique in making
All the things we're going to learn about Kitty today.
making a occupied bed.
Right.
Madeline, my friend, was my
The
partner in this.
the
I
occupants.
made the bed, but with her on top of it, which is much more difficult.
Right.
But that's not the way you're supposed to make a bed.
Gosh.
The worst was sterile dressing techniques, which I also failed. Now, these are fundamentals of
kind of
nursing.
key components. So it's so funny to me that these stories are like yesterday to you. Like
Oh,
it's so
well,
in forefront
yeah.
of your mind that this was how your career was starting.
But I use them in my own teaching when I would have students who were discouraged and
Sure.
say, well,
Yeah.
I don't think I can, I want to be a nurse, but I don't think I
Yeah.
got what it takes. And I would tell them the stories. I will say that I had some undergraduate instructors, Carolyn Kroll and Marjorie Moore, come to mind, who um, encouraged me. So we were supposed to write an essay on why we went into nursing, and I didn't write an essay. I made a collage. And I thought, well, this will never be accepted, so that'll be another
You'll
F.
0 for 5,
But
right? Yeah.
she found that to be creative, and the message that some of these instructors gave me, which I desperately needed at the time, was there's a place for people like
Yes.
you in nursing. Don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
And I found the undergraduate curriculum to be so rigid, and I chafed at it. So I dropped out of nursing and I went into occupational therapy because it still had some of the same
Right. Mhm.
rewards and
Mhm.
working with
Mhm.
people. But the program was disaccredited the semester I transferred into it. So I went back to nursing and kind of suffered through our medical model curriculum till I
Right.
got to my senior year. And my senior year was like the aha moment. I
Oh.
took psych and public health, and I thought,
Mm.
this is it.
You found it.
This is what I
Yeah.
love. This is what I want to do.
Mhm.
And I was really passionate about it. And as
Yeah.
I told you recently, I also took a bunch of independent studies. This is the way I got my interest in things that were not non-nursing. And some were very health oriented, but like the one of the independent studies I did my senior year was at the Institute of Gerontology with Woodrow Morris, and it was on this. So this would be 1970. Brand new concept called dementia. If you can
Oh my
imagine forecasting
gosh.
a career
Wow.
as an undergraduate student, but I
Right.
just absolutely loved it.
Wow.
And so creating opportunities for independent studies to when I could
Mhm.
explore things that were of interest to me beyond the nursing curriculum.
Yeah.
I took lessons in Italian language. We had no language requirement in nursing, but I love opera, and I
Yes.
wanted to be able to read some librettos. So I was trying to do things that were a little bit against the grain, but really helped me get through the nursing
Right.
courses until I arrived at my senior year. It's a
Yeah.
little late to have the aha moment, but that
But
was,
there's an aha moment time that's different for everyone. So I love that you're sharing this story because I do think there are a lot of students who will listen to this who maybe are in that freshman, sophomore, junior, even that senior year, and they're like, when is it going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, they know deep down somewhere I'm in the right track, but they just haven't had that course where you go, oh,
oh, this is
this
it.
is it.
Here's where I
This is
fit.
it. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
where I fit. And we
And
all
what I want to do.
I'm in my mid 50s. And I think I finally found it at the Some Center. So it takes some of us longer than others. But what an enriching way to live. All these independent studies that bring this outside experience and maybe something that seems so otherworldly to nursing, but you run into patients from all over, especially here in Iowa City, you know, at the
Yes.
university. So it's, you know, your love of music or your love of a language maybe speaks to someone for whom you're caring. And that is where that transition of, oh my gosh, you're the nurse providing that incredible care to someone makes all the difference in the way they have that outcome, that
Yeah.
health outcome.
And, things do come full circle, and the opera it did in many respects because I was early on involved in looking at music therapy as
Yes.
an intervention,
Yes.
actually for pain originally,
Yes.
and found that people who liked opera, that I could relate to them and play the music that was distracting. We were using music as a distraction
Yes.
for pain,
Yep.
and so in ways that you would never or I would have never thought about. Same thing with clinical and research interests. My master's thesis here, and so after I got out of the Navy, I came back on the GI Bill and got my master's
Okay.
degree in psychiatric nursing. It was an MA, not an MSN, and it was, we had the medical model curriculum, so psych, mental health nursing was the area I chose. And I just loved it. I just loved it. But then I went right on from getting my master's degree, but I started in a 3-semester non-thesis master's program because I wanted to be a clinician.
Okay. Okay.
And
Not an academic researcher. That was not. You were going to be yes.
What I
yes.
really
Okay.
wanted to be was an independent psychotherapist. That was my goal, and it was just starting now that nurses could
do that.
Could do that sort of thing
right.
and actually get reimbursed for that.
Yes.
But I didn't. I needed a job while I was in graduate school, and the only one left because I came back from the Navy, kind of like 2 weeks before graduate school started, was as a research assistant for Ada Jaycox, who had a federal grant. This was before NINR, but it was the National Center for Nursing Research, and it was called the PAIN Project. It was on pain.
Oh, wow.
And so I just thought, oh, God, research. Ugh.
Right.
I don't want to do that, but it's a core course, so I do. But I fell in love with research as her research assistant. And she opened up so many opportunities for me to give presentations, to write book chapters as a graduate student, and to see the value of clinical research in terms of patient outcomes and patient care. That my 3-semester plan turned into 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
And she guided me
Yeah.
to say, you really need to go on and get a PhD, which was just starting. So this was programs were just starting in the country. There wasn't one here till 1989 at Iowa. But for example, as her research assistant, she would hold conferences here, and I was the gopher. I'd pick people up at the airport and bring coffee and do stuff like that. But she always introduced me.
You were networking before we even knew the word
Yes,
networking. You were
unbeknownst
networking.
to me,
Yes, you
she
were
was setting
networking.
me up. And one of the people she set me up with to drive back to the airport was Helen Grace, who was the dean of the University of Illinois at Chicago at the Med Center College of Nursing, which had one of 10 PhD programs at the time, and so she and Ada had talked and conspired to say, maybe you should think about going to Chicago and getting a PhD. So I did my master's from 74 to 76 here in psych nursing, and then 76 to 80 commuted
Oh my gosh.
by Greyhound bus to Chicago for 4 years.
And you had kids.
I had my
by
first
this
2 kids
time.
were born
Yes.
during
Oh my
the
gosh.
doctoral program, so I've always been particularly sensitive to my students who were,
Right. Who
you
are
know,
moms.
work-life
Yes,
balance
exactly.
and family issues,
Right.
and plus the commuting, and I couldn't afford out-of-state tuition and like an apartment in Chicago, so the University of Illinois was on a quarter system at the time, and there were 10 people in my class and 10 weeks in the quarter. So every week I lived with a different classmate, which had the added benefit, not just financial, but of socialization, being a commuting student.
Yeah.
But I knew my classmates better than anybody else because I lived with them every semester or every quarter, and which was absolutely wonderful because I was well integrated into my class, even though I would leave at 2 a.m. on, well, it would be Monday morning by that time, get into Chicago by 8 on the Greyhound bus,
Oh my gosh.
go to class. And
On the Greyhound bus. In case you missed that, she wasn't driving. She was getting on the Greyhound bus.
We had one
through
old,
weather. I was going to say, and the roads were not, it's not like it was
No,
I-80 as we know it.
And there were some characters on that bus. The bus went from New York to California, and there were
my gosh.
some wild experiences there where I was trying to study during the night.
And you're
but
like, by the way, I think we can use you as a
We had
resource.
one old rattletrap car that would barely make it from our house on Benton Street to the hospital, and my husband was a resident at the time.
Okay.
And so there's no way I could have driven into Chicago. So took the Greyhound
Wow.
bus. Then I'd catch the train to the medical campus and go to school. And then I'd go home from Monday to Thursday with a different classmate every week. And then Thursday night at 8, I would leave on the bus and come back at 2. And then I worked nights at Psych Hospital
Oh my gosh, Kitty.
on Friday,
Oh my
Saturday, and then
gosh.
Sunday would leave.
Okay, so
leave again.
obstacles, Kitty knows how to get over
Yeah.
obstacles. You
Yeah.
just, sometimes when you find what you love, you just figure out how to do it. You really do. You know how to put your head down.
Yes,
So this was your PhD.
it was.
What was your official, what is your PhD? Is it psych mental health? What
Yes,
is
psych mental health. It was
Okay.
actually designing, implementing, and evaluating a discharge planning program on a psych ward for depressed patients.
Okay. So, I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, the way we look at mental health now and how we continually say we want to have better conversations about it. But here you were, 1980, where a lot of people did not want to talk about mental health outside of the clinical realm.
Right.
In society, we weren't talking about mental health. I think about people I probably knew who had depression, but we didn't know the word depression outside of the clinical world. How was that integrated into your clinical practice? And when did you start to see that kind of edging out of clinical practice into society?
Well, it really didn't in those early years.
Well, and that's what I'm
I was
wondering,
lucky.
right?
The dean, Helen Graves at Illinois, was a psych nurse herself.
Okay.
And so I had a lot of support and guidance in terms of what I wanted to do for my dissertation.
Sure.
And I took an independent study with her where I would read recommended books or journal articles and just have a discussion with the dean every week, which was really, and I learned about theoretical frameworks and things that weren't part of my PhD curriculum, but it really solidified my love for this area. Also, I did clinical practice it was called ISPI, the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute, which was right on the campus, and it was the really old world asylum.
Eye-opening.
So such an eye-opener,
gosh.
and really said we can do better. We have to do better,
Right.
and so there was a lot of joy in working with this. Joy and sadness in working with this population,
Right.
and wanting to be in on changing that.
So how did those changes come about?
Well,
I mean,
I
obviously we're
struggled with
slow.
some of them. I would tell you,
Yeah.
I came out of my only practice right out of undergraduate was in the Navy during the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And I spent most of it on Guam. We were extraordinarily autonomous.
Sure.
One reason being there was no telephone system on the island. So if I, as a nurse, and I worked nights so I could scuba dive by day.
It was a little different than other
I wasn't
locations.
so career focused at the time. But scuba diving was great on Guam, by the way.
Yes.
So I would never think of paging one of the physicians for a simple order because they were all he's
Of
at
course,
the time,
yes.
would have to drive to like the Hilton. There were a lot of Japanese honeymoon hotels and Hilton Hotel,
Okay,
and
okay.
phone in to the hospital for the order. So we had standing orders like you wouldn't believe.
Just ready to go,
and
sure.
and a lot of respect from
Right.
and very collaborative practice. It was almost like being an
Wow.
advanced practice nurse without the
Wow.
credentials, but just the circumstances.
Sure.
We got Aerovacs from Vietnam coming in. We had a mash pad on the back of the hospital. You didn't have time to pussyfoot around it.
Wow.
So I come back. I start graduate school. I start working nights at Psych Hospital, 2 days. And the patient I was caring for spiked a temp, and I ordered blood gases. And then another one was constipated, and I ordered milk and magnesia, which is, you can buy it at Walgreens. And I got called before a medical tribunal for practicing medicine without a license.
Gosh,
Big
Kitty.
slap on the wrist. I was able to explain to them that my only practice reference had been as a Navy nurse during the Vietnam War. And if I had called a physician to get an order for milk and magnesia, I would have been run out of town.
Right.
Given what was going on.
Perspective.
And so I didn't get fired, but I got a big verbal reprimand.
Yeah, right.
And the other huge difference, and maybe you've read that book by Kristen Hanna, The Women.
Oh, I love
it
Kristen
wasn't.
Hanna. Oh my gosh,
we didn't have the
fabulous author.
We had Aravax, but we had
Right.
people who could live past the front lines who were too sick or injured to make it back to the States. That's who we got. So it wasn't the level of trauma and everything that is documented in that book, but it was busy.
Right.
We also had typhoons, and since we were one of the big concrete structures on the island, all of like the pregnant women from the surrounding Marianas Islands would come in.
Right.
And we weren't allowed to leave if we were in, that's the nursing staff, within 48 hours of the eye of a typhoon. We just stayed in there and
hunkered down, basically.
Hunkered down.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So very different practice model, and that was.
But that was your whole experience.
It
That was all your perspective.
And it was a great learning experience.
Right.
So here, I had a BSN from the University of Iowa. I thought I was pretty,
your stuff.
pretty hot stuff. My first day as a nurse on Guam, I had a poisonous stonefish bite.
We don't have that in Iowa.
a child dying of tetanus from one of the outer islands, which we were
Kitty.
responsible
Oh, my
from
gosh.
a World War II Trust
Yeah.
Territory convention for caring for.
Yeah.
I had seen pictures in a textbook.
Right,
I'd never actually seen
Right.
a child dying of tetanus.
Yeah.
And then they said to me, one of the local swimmers has got the bends, which is from diving too deep.
Yeah.
And
It's an air pressure.
It is, but it also affects the heart. There's something
yes.
called mediastinal drift. So you have to go sit in the decompression chamber. And it did not take long for me to become humbled after thinking I knew what I was doing and having no idea how to ride a decompression chamber or what to do with somebody who's had a poisonous stonefish bite. It was humbling. It was also a terrific experience in organization, dealing with Aravax coming in, dealing culturally with the Chamorro people, the Guamanians, who had a belief that if you were present when the soul of the person left the body and went to heaven, that they celebrated before burial 7 nights, and they wanted you were an honored guest to be there. Well, I worked nights, and so sometimes I could go.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, the delicacy was fruit bat at these funerals.
You're like, sorry, I might have to miss that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
But if I couldn't make it because of my work schedule, the families would bring in things because it was important for me to be involved in these rituals. And so the cultural components, and whenever I had a weekend off, I would go on these missions to Palau and Kapangi Marangi and Eastern and Western Carolinas, the outer islands, where we would do assessments, which started with de-louse and de-infest, and then begin. And so it was an abrupt change from practicing in Iowa.
Well, but the ultimate
wonderful.
experience in community health,
Absolutely.
which I think about what you said earlier,
Yes.
where you got that
Yes.
experience with psychology and community health. This was the ultimate, which I don't think we think about here, maybe in Iowa, especially Iowa City, where we have the specialist and everything. But you get out maybe even into some of our rural areas in Iowa, or where we do have other cultures who have come in to work. The way we need to approach healthcare does need to be a little more of that community health, public health concept. And it's funny to me that you were dealing with these things late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, and we're still talking about these things, and it's 2024. you
but
know.
also honoring their traditions
Well,
and
respecting that. Yeah.
and the importance of the family.
Absolutely.
So those were
Absolutely. Yeah.
important lessons early on.
So fast forwarding, okay, so now you've had this experience. You're a PhD, and you've discovered you love research. What happened in Kitty's life with the research? Because there was something called PLST
Yes.
that became incredibly important.
That actually wasn't um, the first.
It wasn't the first, right? Yeah, it wasn't the first, right? Right.
So I came back for graduate school from 1976 to 1980, and then I
Right.
joined the faculty of the College of Nursing. I was the first PhD in nursing on the faculty here, and I thought, well, again, a little hubris here. I'm gonna just do great things, and I was assigned to teach Introduction to Health to 175 pre-nursing freshmen. And I think it was, like for their essays trying to teach them what a primary source was, because they'd often reference like Mademoiselle magazine and some
That
of these things. I
that
thought,
wasn't research
I
based. Wait.
commuted to Chicago for 4 years in order to teach.
Right, they're quoting
this.
Mademoiselle, which was a magazine back in the day. So.
But then the college got a grant to move the master's program to Des Moines, to expand it. And I was tapped to teach the research methods course there. Now, there were two professors, Gloria Bielacek and Hope Solomons, teaching 7 students at Iowa. I had 13 students by myself driving to Des Moines.
Yeah.
But these were such committed, these were nurses who worked all day, 7 to 3:30. We had class from 4 to 7, and they came, and some of it was deer in the headlights, like, because I also taught the statistics component. But I think every one of them went on and got their master's from the University of Iowa. Some of them became faculty.
Right.
A lot of them were like from the VA in Knoxville and the VA in the Iowa Veterans Home in Marshalltown, and went on to leadership positions. And if they didn't conduct research there, they fostered the conduct of research in their own institutions. So it was what could have been a bad thing, because I had a baby, and I would take him when I drive to the Drake campus, which is where we held classes, to a sorority house, and they'd babysit with him from 4 until 7. And when I was done teaching, and then I would, if the weather was bad or something, I would stay over with one of my students, but usually drive home.
Yeah.
So that was an important lesson in research by teaching it. And then I also, Jerry Felton came in as the dean then, and she was bound and determined to take us from that second class academic status. She said, our faculty will have PhDs.
Oh, I love it.
And we will have coursework on a par with everybody else, and we will make the same promotion and tenure expectations as all other faculty. So at that time, we had tenured assistant professors without PhDs on the faculty. And this was not their fault. It was the maturation of our profession.
Exactly. Right.
And so it was perfect to be in on the groundwork. You know, I was just coming back to a place that said, we're going to move forward. And eventually, in 1989, we started our own doctoral program, which was a great source of that. But I started a research project with my former student colleagues at the Knoxville VA, which was called Increasing Communication Ability with patients with aphasia. Most of them had stroke. And you say, well, what's a psych nurse doing with that? But I was really interested, and I observed from my clinical practice there that these patients were isolated. Their chairs were always up against the wall. They weren't engaged. They weren't participating in activities. And I was interested in the emotional consequences of of their lack of being able to communicate, and the social isolation and lack of engagement had for them, especially anxiety and depression.
Oh, depression, yes.
So I
huge.
partnered with the wonderful speech language pathologist team at Knoxville and wrote a grant. It was my first large grant, that like over $200,000, from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
Yes.
And the setup at Knoxville at the time was ideal for a controlled experimental study. They had two identical Building 101 A and B.
Oh, perfect.
And they
Right.
were, the patient populations were very similar.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
staffing was very similar. And so I had 101A was my experimental unit and 101B was my control unit. And that was my first real
Right.
big
Yeah.
externally funded study. And the message I got from Dean Felton, I should have called her Jerry. Dean Felton was, okay, here's what we need from you.
Oh,
We
wow.
need external funding,
Yeah.
and we need, in addition to grants, we need publications,
Wow.
which was not the norm or expectation. And I heard the message.
Right.
It was good advice.
Yeah. You were leading the way, because that is what's expected now, and that is part of the reason we have, number 4 in the nation with our College of Nursing now,
Yes.
that those things
Yes.
are expected. So you were the change.
Well,
And
a
that
part
change,
of that.
You're part of that change, right?
So how I got into gerontology was through the research route.
Okay.
And I was at a lawn party of a faculty member, Joanne McCluskey, who had a lovely brick house on Melrose Avenue. And it was the 100th anniversary of the house, and it was
Oh, wow.
having some lemonade with Jay Semmel, who was then one of the directors of sponsored programs.
Okay.
And I said to him, just in conversation at this party, Jay, the dean says that I need to get some grants. So if something comes across your desk that you think I might be interested, let me know. I mean, this is
Right.
career by fiat.
Yeah.
Within 2 weeks comes this campus envelope with a yellow stick ick and still with the smiley face,
Oh.
which were just coming out about the time,
Funny.
from Jay saying, apply for a career development award in geriatric mental health. From the National Institutes of Mental Health. And I
Oh
looked
my
at the
gosh.
criteria that was offered to psychiatrists
Mhm.
and to psychiatric nurses only. And you had to have a
Right.
master's degree in psychiatric nursing, which I had.
Right.
And the psychiatrists had to have completed a residency. And so I thought, well, I'll write this as a KO1,
Right.
a career
Oh
development
my
award.
gosh, yes.
No, they weren't any at the time. And so I checked myself into the Alexis Inn, which is this kind of skaggy hotel, because I had to get away from my children to be able to write this grant over the weekend. And I had 2 by that time under the age of 2. And it was not easy to
Oh my
concentrate at
gosh.
home. So I wrote the Career Development Award. I gave it to Dean Felton to look at. And she's a good editor. She made a lot of suggestions. And then I engaged, we had a nurse physiologist who was a nun. I'm trying to think of her name now. I can't remember. She was wonderful. She was PhD prepared, and she taught
Oh my gosh.
the physiology courses. And Liz Burns was her name. And Woodrow Morris,
Yes,
from my experience,
yes,
and then Tom Walls, who was at the School of Social Work, who was a gerontologist as
Oh,
well.
wow.
And I made them my internal advisory committee, and wrote this grant about I need to learn gerontology. So the
Right.
first year
Yeah.
of my Career Development Award will be taking coursework, and I'll be taking courses with Dr. Walls at the School
Right.
of Social Work
Right.
and elsewhere. And then I'm going to develop grant sites.
Yeah.
And one was the Iowa Veterans Home in
Okay.
Marshalltown, Iowa.
Right.
Another was the VA, where I
Mhm.
started.
Mhm.
And the third was the Abbey Center for Community Mental Health, which is where I wrote a grant for the Elderly Outreach Project,
Okay.
the Mental Health of the Rural Elderly Outreach Project.
Right.
So
Right.
all 3 of those kind of pilot years during my Career Development Award turned into major external
Right.
funding awards. One from the Administration on Aging, one from NIMH, and let me think where the
Wow.
other one was NINR.
Yeah.
And so that was the pivotal
That was
point in my career,
okay.
was this Career Development
Sure.
Award,
Sure.
this K Award. Not only was I socialized into what happens at the NIH and the grant mechanisms.
That's the National Institute for Health, if anyone is listening
Oh,
who
yes,
doesn't know
thank you.
those
Yeah.
acronyms. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I was so naive when I started out and submitted this K Award. Liz Burns came around to my office. I was working late at night, and I had put her on my grant. She said, "Whatever happened to that?" And I said, "Well, guess I didn't get it because I haven't heard anything." I didn't know it took 9 months.
Oh, to hear back.
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
had
gosh.
no knowledge of the
Right.
mechanisms, and we had nobody on our faculty at that time who was really.
Were we in internet yet?
I don't even
I don't
remember.
Well,
I don't
if it was
think so.
probably
I wrote it,
mid to late
I
80s.
think I wrote it on a yellow pad.
So it wasn't
actually.
that instant feedback that we're so
Yeah.
accustomed to, right?
Yeah.
Now.
But she said, "Well, did you get a pink postcard?" And that's how they would notify you of your seat. And I said, "Yes, I've got it in a drawer here." And she said, "Call the number." And because she
had experience.
grants.
Yeah.
Her area was fetal alcohol syndrome,
Oh,
what
gosh.
happened to neurologically in fetal alcoholism. She's a great researcher. And so I did, and I got the deputy director of the National Institute of Mental Health answered the phone. And he said to me, "Well, don't jingle the coins in your pocket." I can remember this conversation. But your priority score, this is before percentile, so that's how.
Okay.
Your priority score is XYZ. I didn't know what a priority
What
score
does it
was.
even mean?
I didn't know what pay lines were. And it goes to council
Oh my
in 2
gosh.
weeks. And I didn't know what council was.
I
I didn't
you're
know there
like,
was a
okay, yeah,
two-step
right.
mechanism that you had to get through, the
The system, the process.
the system.
Yeah.
They had
yeah.
to have the grant and
Yes.
approved, and then council would they fund it. I was also very, very pregnant at that time with my third child, teaching summer school, a research methods course, and I got the grant. I found out in July. She was born in September during the first meeting of of my
gosh.
group in Washington, D.C., and I thought this will just confirm everybody's fears about funding a woman and funding a nurse.
Oh,
So what does she
Kitty,
do? She misses the
wow.
meeting because she's having a baby.
Having a baby,
Yeah.
right? Well, that's it. She's out.
But that was the
Wow.
turning point, the exposure to other investigators,
Right.
the collaboration,
Right.
not only with my nurse colleagues there who are from all over the country, but also with the geropsychiatrist,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
is a really a changing point.
The change.
And I came back, and part of the expectation for having had this award is that you will start things related
Right.
to geriatric mental
Right.
health back at your own institution. So
Yeah.
I developed a course and
And I
the doctoral program.
And I
with
love what
others.
I'm hearing here too. You know, I said when we introduced Kitty that she sits on our SOME leadership team, which is interdisciplinary because aging doesn't care what you do. It doesn't
right.
care your background, what your degrees are in, if you even have a degree. Aging, we're
In
all
fact,
going
it's
to
an
get
asset
to age.
to get those different perspectives.
Right, it is. It makes us better in what we're doing. And I'm hearing, like, you were starting to pull these people together from
Yes.
these different backgrounds, these interdisciplinary backgrounds, to talk about all the different factors, socioeconomic, whatever it might be, that impact the way we age, but our mental health. And you hear that now, and I think, you know, this kind of exploded post-COVID that, oh, we need to look at our social determinants of health, and it does.
Yeah.
We know that it's holistic.
We
It's
just
this
didn't call it
we
that
just
at the
didn't
time.
call it
Yeah.
that. I know all of this time, but so interesting to me. It's so interesting to me, stumbling your way forward into the successful
Yeah.
career and doing all of these things that were really, when you look back on it, they were firsts of their, you know, especially for us here at the University of Iowa.
And I've been, speaking of reminiscence, dealing with that lately because it's the 50th anniversary of the Journal of Gerontological Nursing, which
Okay.
I was the second editor of from 1997 to 2011. And I went back and looked at some of those issues that I had edited,
Right.
And we were already starting with things like health equity. We didn't call it
We didn't
that.
right.
We called
right.
it, we need to pay attention to ethnicity.
Right.
And social determinants of health. But
Yeah.
again, we looked at environments
Yes.
and that sort of thing, but just beginning, but laying a foundation
Right.
for what is now coming to fruition 20-some years later.
Are we doing better?
We're doing
Are
better.
we doing,
We're
like,
not there
make
yet,
me feel
but we're
good,
doing
Kitty. Like, make
Yeah.
me feel good about all of the work
It's-
that you've
do you
done.
remember that old saying, we've come a long way, baby?
We've come a long way. We've still got a
We
long way
have.
to go. but
Exactly right.
We
Yeah.
are doing better.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're having, and I hope we're having healthier conversations about things like mental health, about aging. You know, I was having this conversation yesterday with someone, and we're the same age, and I said, you know, when my grandma was our age, she was old. Like, she
Yeah.
didn't drive. Grandpa took she and my Aunt Marguerite to get their hair done, and they sat, and they lived in this bubble where they were old. And I look at what can be accomplished now and the way we live optimally, whatever that means for you. And you don't stop. You're like the Duracell bunny. Because not only you had this amazing career from which you've retired, but boy, do I use quotes around that, because you don't stop. You're still engaged and
Well, there's
active.
a lot you can do. I
Yes.
formally retired in 2011.
Yeah, everybody would laugh at you.
But
I mean,
I'm still engaged,
Yes.
and that's, I think, the advice I would give younger people: find something that you're passionate about that will sustain you, and then
Yeah.
you can find ways. It may not be still, and thank God I don't have to write grants anymore. But I
Right.
I still love to edit,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I love working with people both in Jarrow and outside of Jarrow.
Yes.
With
Yes.
about the complex care and the community group,
Yes.
and
yeah.
I work with doctoral students getting their both here but elsewhere around the country in getting their publications out of their
Yeah.
dissertations, which is an essential step. So there are things I still have some competencies for, and I've
Right.
told everybody I work with, look, if you see me like using the third edition of APA or something awful like that, call me on it, and I'll know I'm starting to.
That'll be my sign.
Yeah,
right? I
that'll
really
be
have
my
to-
time to gracefully really
Yes.
retire. But I still find so many things
Yeah.
interesting, and
Yes.
it's really a joy to see, just a wonderful joy to see my former students. I'm going actually to Ohio State this weekend because one of my former postdocs, Harvard postdoc,
Yes.
is the dean of the
Oh my gosh.
College of Nursing there, and she's invited me for the Ohio
love
State
it.
Iowa football game, but also to be a visiting professor
I
for
love
a
it.
day there.
Yeah.
So it just people have done so well, and I loved teaching my students. In fact, when I retired from here, and Oklahoma offered me an opportunity to teach their Jarrow doctoral
Right.
students, I took it because
Yeah.
still, it's a source of satisfaction.
Sure.
It's kind of a selfish
You're
thing to
well,
do,
that's
but
not so. You're still impacting people's lives and their ability to have a really amazing career. And something I talk about when I'm out with doing community engagement, we do talk about research, education, and practice a lot at the Some Center because we're with the College of Nursing and the University of Iowa. These are the things that we do. Those things, the research you've done, will impact the way I age. Sometimes we don't think about what that research is that's happening and how it will impact us down the line,
Yeah.
or our kids, and it will help us. It really does. And so it's hard to sometimes to place when you're not from that academic background, placing yourself into that universe and, okay, how is this going to touch me? Well, it touches you every day if you go to the doctor.
it does.
all of
And I
those
realized
things,
that,
yeah.
I thought when I was caregiving for my
Mhm.
parents, I thought, I'm supposed to know this stuff. I'm telling
Right.
other people what to do. And it's still a struggle when it's
Yes,
personal.
when it's personal, the
you know,
emotional
yeah.
connection is tough. And I also love, too, what you were talking about just a few seconds ago, the reach of the University of Iowa College of Nursing. We have placed students into these leadership roles in so many universities across
all over
the
all over the world.
all
Yeah,
over the world. And you've
exactly.
got to be a part of their careers. You get to still be part of their careers, and that's
And
incredible.
it's very rewarding to see all the
Yeah.
good things
Yeah.
they're doing.
2 questions I wanted to ask you. What do you think of the world of gerontology, the field of gerontology today?
Well, I think I'm
And I know
basically
that's a wide open
being
question.
an optimist.
Sure.
I think there's not enough, but increasing recognition of the continuum. So,
Yes.
we need to start thinking about our health
Yes.
and aging
Mhm.
a lot
Early,
earlier.
early,
Doing
early, yes.
good things for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're discovering the importance of engagement and
Mhm.
social
Mhm.
contact, and the
Right.
other side of the coin, the adverse consequences of social isolation.
Yeah.
Iowa City is a wonderful community to live in. The senior college, I take
It's
at least one
fabulous.
course,
Yes.
and I've taught a couple of them every semester. Aging with vitality,
Yes. Oh, I
and
love that.
all of those
Love
things I
that.
think are protective
Yes.
cognitively.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful being in a community where there are so many opportunities
Yeah.
like that.
And you are also, I will say, not only are you probably like the best liaison for the College of Nursing at the University of Iowa, but you are also an incredibly active community member. You are volunteering, you sit on boards, you are putting yourself as a resident into these places where you can also impact the way people of all ages live. I want to give you a shout out on that. If you want to
Thank you.
name some of those, you're welcome to. But
Well,
I know I run into you at other locations, or I meet other people, and they're like, "Oh, well, do you know Kitty?" And we're like, "Everyone knows Kitty."
well,
And I think that
thank
again
you.
comes back to that. It's engagement. It's staying connected. It's being challenged. So and so has an issue, and how do we get together? We
Yeah.
pull all of our resources together to solve that and make life better for people.
Well, I think there's a lot of luck. So I didn't have really a planned career, but I always relied on a quotation by Pasteur: "Chance favors the prepared mind." So I feel like my undergraduate and graduate education here at the University of Iowa um, gave me the curiosity and interest and fundamental education to be able to
Right.
try new things.
Yes.
And, I had never been an administrator, but then I became the associate professor for health sciences for 7 years, and that was a clear departure. And then coming back after 7 years to a faculty role and having to restart the whole grant
Right.
process and everything.
Yes.
But it was all good. And
Yes.
the other thing I would say is, so the timing, starting my career when I did
Right.
in the
Right.
early 70s, when gerontology
Oh,
and the
gosh.
concept of dementia and
Yes.
caregiving was exploding, when the National Center for Nursing Research became an institute, when NIA and NIMH, which previously had not funded nurses, started embracing them
Right.
into their portfolio.
Yes.
I mean, I was so lucky
Yeah.
just to be in on the groundwork of that, and to, because of the Career Development Award, made those connections with other disciplines and other
Right. Yeah.
institutes besides nursing. But the other thing was having that clinical background from my days as a Navy nurse. And boy, you worked, you'd
Yeah.
report for duty, and if labor and delivery was busy, you delivered babies. If the OR was busy, you scrubbed.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
had a real sense of clinical mastery, so that when I would teach research methods to clinicians who were like, wow, why do I need to know this stuff?
Yes.
Um,
It
I,
matters.
and they would say, well, you don't know how busy we are. Um,
Yeah.
and we don't have time for research. And I say, let me tell you
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
reporting to work at a hospital with 122 beds and your census is 212.
Oh,
I know
gosh.
what busy is. I've
Right.
lived it. I appreciate what your
Sure.
circumstances are. So let's work together to
Let's-
find a way that we can make your practice evidence-based.
Yes.
So
Which you did. And we don't do anything now that isn't evidence-based.
But I did a
You know.
stint, as associate director of the Office of Nursing Research, but I was
Yeah.
physically located at the hospital.
Yeah.
Tony Church-Breimer was there.
Yes.
And it was a collaborative. It was wonderful. I loved working at UIHC.
Yeah.
The nurses there were full of good ideas. And were so bright. And when we started our doctoral program, it was a synergy
Yeah.
of their uh, getting the preparation to do the really good clinical research
Yeah.
that continues to this day, and then saying our practice has to be,
Yes.
and developing these evidence-based
Yes.
protocols
Yeah.
with us.
What a change in the career of nursing you have
Yes,
experienced, you
yes,
know?
yeah.
I feel like we could do a part 2 with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my
Thank you
pleasure.
for
I'm sorry I
sharing your
talked your ear off.
No,
but-
this is what it's about. It's so fun to be able to share community partners and researchers and all of the good people that we have met at the Some Center, and just giving you the opportunity to share those stories. Before the podcast started, before we started recording, we were talking about that sense of history and how important it is. Sometimes you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've
You don't,
been.
yeah.
And we
But
talk
also
about that
nursing
history.
in the context of social change.
Yes.
And part of it was I
Yeah.
lived through women's consciousness
Yes.
raising
Oh my
as
gosh.
a college
Yeah.
student. And,
Yeah.
you know, we would still stand up when a physician entered the room, and
Wow.
wearing the pointed white hats and
Yes, and your skirts and your
little-
white, yes, yeah.
white hose and
yes.
that sort of thing. And
Different times, but
different times, but we survived it and
Yes.
developed a nursing identity.
yes.
And I can remember going around. Dean Felton had asked me to talk to other leaders who would vote at graduate school
Right.
about should we have a PhD program in nursing. And the prevailing thought at the time was, why would a nurse need
Why
a
would you need
PhD?
it? Why?
And
oh
I
my
don't think
gosh.
that
Yeah.
anybody would.
Right. Nobody would even bat an eye. Of course
I know.
we need that
And
now.
that hasn't been
Yeah.
that long ago. That
I
was
know.
1989.
Right.
So we've come a long ways
Yes, we have
in a
come a long-
relatively short period of time. And I feel blessed to have been a part of that and a witness to it.
Yeah. So we're going to leave you with that optimism that we have come a long way. We have really done, and a lot of that here at the College of Nursing is thanks to
Absolutely.
you. Appreciate it. So thank you for joining us today on Embracing the Journey of Aging. If you would like to hear more from Kitty, stay tuned. I think we'll have a part 2 down the road, but you can find all of our information on our website. You can search for us on all your social media platforms. We would love to have contact from you and chat with you about how you are aging optimally. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care.